Hi, this is Joe, and in this video, this is the second video in the series on creating an AC/DC current data logger using an ESP8266 microcontroller. So in this video, we're going to show you how to set up your computer with the needed software that will allow you to program or code your software that will interact with the ESP8266 in order to capture current readings from the analog to digital converter through the AC/DC clamp meter. Let's talk a little bit about the software that we're going to be first installing. This is called the Arduino IDE, Integrated Development Environment. It's a nice user-friendly program that provides you with an editor that allows you to program your program or code your program, and then it allows you to compile that program. Compiling is converting that code to a language that the microcontroller can understand, and then it allows you to download the code to the microcontroller through a USB port connected from your computer to the actual microcontroller itself. There's also other software in the Arduino IDE that if you've set up messaging in your program running on the ESP8266, you can monitor those messages through the serial interface. Basically, you can monitor the serial port on the microcontroller, and the microcontroller can then send messaging to your PC through the serial interface. So you can monitor what the microcontroller is actually doing and the data it's actually processing. So let's go ahead and get started here. Again, the nice thing about the Arduino IDE is it's a free tool. It runs on Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. It also has a Code Online version, which it has basically the code in a web application. If you want to, you can write directly in a web interface. I like to use the application running on the actual computer, and in my case I'm running Windows. So let's go ahead and download the IDE. You just click on the link and just download. If you want to make a contribution, you can. And then it's going to download. So after this finishes downloading, I'll show you how to install this program. After the Arduino IDE has successfully downloaded, go ahead and open up your Downloads folder and double click on the Arduino IDE executable. At this point, it's going to start the installation process. I normally accept all of the default settings. We're going to give permission now to install. And we'll just go ahead and wait for this to install now. We can now click the Finish link. Now the Arduino IDE is starting to load. If you get a dialog asking you to install a CH340 driver, go ahead and perform the install, as that is the driver that allows you to communicate through your USB port on your PC to the microcontroller. And that's just a standard driver. Just as you would install a driver to talk to your printer, you have to install a driver to talk to the microcontroller. So at this point, as you see, we now have the Arduino IDE loaded and on the desktop. What we're going to do now is we're going to install some software to be able to recognize the ESP8266. Now, if you weren't prompted to install the driver for the microcontroller, go ahead and launch your browser and type in CH340 and perform a search. And again, depending on whether you have Windows, Mac, or Linux, you can click on the link, and at this point you can, again, either select the proper driver for Windows, Macintosh, or Linux. Because I have Windows, I'm going to select that. So first we're going to download the driver for the CH340. And then we're going to install the driver. Once you finish downloading the CH340 driver, open up your downloads folder and you'll see a file, and it's a compressed file. If you click on that, you'll be taken to I use 7-zip, which is a uncompression program. If you have Windows and you don't have a uncompressed program, go ahead and you can download 7-zip. I put the link in the description. What this does is this will uncompress that file into an executable that you can then execute. You just come up here and you select the extract. It's going to ask you what folder you would like to extract this to, and it's my downloads folder. You can then click that and then you can install that. But in this case I already have 7-zip installed, so all I have to do is, as you saw, just extract it and then go over to the same downloads folder, find the executable, and execute it. And what it's going to do is it's going to pop up a dialog asking you to perform the install, and you click on that. And in this particular case, it says the driver is successfully pre-installed in advance. So in my particular case, it was already installed. You may get a slightly different message. If you get an error, then what you want to do is do the uninstall first and then the install. And then that will determine whether the driver is properly installed or not. Once we're done with that, we can close the dialog. And now we can set up the Arduino IDE for the ESP8266. In order to use that microcontroller with the Arduino IDE, we have to install a set of libraries and things, and we'll talk about what that is here in a minute. Let's go ahead and open up the Arduino IDE if you don't already have it loaded on your desktop. And over on the File menu, open the File menu, and there's a Preferences menu item. Let's open that. Make sure we're on the Settings tab, and down at the very bottom it says Additional Boards Manager URLs. I put a link in the description with this URL, and you want to paste that. It starts out with http://arduino.esp8266.com. What this is this is a package that allows us to install the needed libraries for the ESP8266 microcontroller. So once we type that in, we're going to select OK. And then you'll notice it's downloading the package of software, so we can set up the Arduino IDE to be able to work with the ESP8266 microcontroller. Once we've downloaded the ESP8266 package, we now need to select and install the drivers for that board. Board is referred to as a microcontroller. So what we do is we go over to Tools, we select Board, and we select Boards Manager. And then what we want to type in up at the very top in the search dialog is ESP8266. And you notice here it says ESP by ESP8266 Community. And the version may be different than the one shown here. You want to select the latest version, which is usually the default here. And then you want to click on the install link, And what you'll see here in the output dialog is you'll see that it's installing all of the necessary libraries and files so that we can write programs successfully for the ESP8266. And this will take a few minutes. And then notice at the very bottom of the output, it says platform ESP8266, ESP8266 at 3.1.2. That's the version, and it says it's been installed. So, and there's no errors here, so we now know that the drivers and the libraries have been properly set up in the Arduino IDE for the ESP8266. Once our install of our libraries and package have completed, we now want to go up to the Tools menu. We want to select Board, and you'll notice now that there's an entry for ESP8266, and then a list of particular ESP8266s are displayed. We want to scroll down, and we want to select. Notice there is a Node MCU 1.0, and then in parentheses it says ESP-12E module. We want to select that, and you'll notice at the very top in the dialog that will be shown, we've now set up the Arduino IDE to recognize this board and allow us to write programs for this particular microcontroller. We now want to get our microcontroller, our ESP8266, and we want to remove it from the box. Leave the foam pad on the pins on the bottom. Get your USB cable. This has to be a micro USB cable. Notice there is a USB port on the board. What you want to do is plug the board in. You'll notice the beep, and then you'll get some information about the board on the display of the ESP8266. This was put on at the manufacturer, and it's used to tell you information about the board. And if you see this, then you know the board is working. So now we have to determine which communications port the board is communicating with, so we can set that up in the Arduino IDE. Let me show you how to do that. First, we want to go to the settings. Once the settings menu loads, we can type in Device Manager. And give it a sec to load. Now what you want to do is scroll down till you get your ports COM and LPT. And if you read through the ports, you'll notice USB serial CH340 COM4. So that's the port that the ESP8266 is on. So we can go ahead and close this dialog, close that dialog. We can now go up to Tools. We can select Port and select COM4. Now what we can do is select Get Board Info. This is on the Tools menu. And you'll notice that there's a VID, and a PID. And those are USB identifications for the board. So as you see, it recognizes the board. So now we know we have the Arduino IDE set up for the 8266. We've plugged in the ESP8266 to the USB port connected to our computer. We've selected the proper COM port, and we can do a Get Board Info. So now we know that we can successfully communicate with the microcontroller at this point. Let's talk a little bit about the language that you use when writing programs in the Arduino IDE. The Arduino IDE was created by a company based in Italy, and they modeled the language that you use to a very standard programming language called C and C++. Now, a lot of people will argue this point that it really isn't C or C++, but a lot of the language pieces, or what are called in the industry constructs, are based on C and C++. And a lot of the programs that you write rely on external sources called libraries. Now, what is a library? Well, for example, we saw that the ESP8266 had an LED display on it that we can write to. So the authors of various devices and components that can attach to the ESP8266 have developed a series of libraries, and all a library is a collection of related programs referred to as functions, and they're put together in a series of files. And in order to, let's say, write to that LED display, you have to load and have the Arduino IDE be able to reference these libraries. And then once you reference those and you put the libraries in a location that the Arduino IDE can know where they are or where they live, you can then include those libraries into your program and then call the functions. Let's say in the case of the LED, we want to write characters and or graphics to the LED display. You would use those functions built into that library. So the whole environment of Arduino IDE is very similar to that of C and C++, which heavily uses libraries. Now, the nice thing about libraries is a lot of different people write libraries for the different sensors and devices that you can connect to the ESP8266. So there's plenty of libraries available. So instead of having to write your own libraries, you can rely on libraries that have been written by other developers. So it makes the Arduino IDE a very popular, easy to use environment because you can use libraries that other developers have written. So in order to reference a library in the Arduino IDE, we have to do two things. We have to first download that library, and then we have to tell the Arduino IDE where it lives. So what we do is we go over to the Tools menu, we select Manage Libraries, and then we can type in this case, we have to tell the Arduino IDE that we want to reference the libraries for the LED display. That library is called U8G2. So if we type that into the library manager, notice the first entry that we get is a library called U8G2 by Oliver. And that's the library we want to use in order to be able to, in our programs, write information to the LED display that is part of the ESP8266. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the install. The version that is shown here may not match the version that you have because they're always updating the libraries. So let's do an install. You notice it's installing the library. Once the library has been installed, the Arduino IDE now can recognize that library, and in your programs, when you want to write information to the LED display, you can then reference those functions that live in that library. And I'll show you a little later how you reference or include the library in your program. So there's a few more libraries we have to add when we're writing our program for the AC to DC data logger. So as we progress, I'll show you how we're going to add those additional references to the libraries, and then when we're writing the code, I'll show you how you include those references to your program. Before we install the next library, the video is getting a bit long, so we're going to end the second video here, and then we'll pick up in the next video. So we'll see you next time.